Good morning, students and teachers. Welcome to our second field trip. I am so excited today to continue our global warming presentation. Today we have two amazing presenters coming to us from Generation Earth at Tree People. We have Maria Adame. Good morning, students and teachers. Welcome to our second field trip. I am so excited today to continue our global warming. So students, please enjoy this presentation. And now I am going to go ahead and pass it. Our essential question today that we want you to stay focused on is, how is technology helping us combat global warming? So I'm going to share now.
Carolina, may I share my screen now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let's give that a go. All right, everybody, good morning. As your principal kindly introduced us, my name is Maria Adame, and I'm joined today by Emi Kusayanagi, and we're going to be talking about tree canopy and how technology helps us work around tree canopy. So our guiding question for the day is, how is technology helping us combat global warming? And again, Emi and I are here from Generation Earth. Generation Earth is a program of the County of Los Angeles, but it is housed at Tree People. So what that means is Tree People is helping the County of Los Angeles carry out the Generation Earth program. And some of our challenge questions, which we will pose on the slide, so you don't have to write these down or anything, are: what is the heat island effect and who does it affect? 2, how can we use technology to combat climate change? And 3, what can you do to help cool your cities? So these are the questions that we want you to try and find answers for as we speak. But first, let's look at this image. Emi, what do you see in this image?
I see a lot of blue sky, which is great. And I see a peaceful neighborhood, but I don't see a lot of trees. And so it's making me feel a little bit hot. What about you?
Yeah, when I look at it, I think I wouldn't want to have to walk home after school in, that heat. I also would probably wait until the sun goes down to go and play soccer or, sit outside and read my book. I wouldn't want to hang out here at 3 p.m.
Yeah, and the road looks really, really hot. I wouldn't want to walk barefoot on that road.
Exactly. I also noticed that there aren't a lot of trees in this picture. Right? So now let's look at this other picture. Whoops. What do you see or what do you feel when you look at this image, Emi?
Well, when I see this image, even though it's only a picture, I immediately feel cooler, actually. And it makes me feel like I want to take in a deep breath because the air seems fresh and the trees are lovely. And I like to go on a walk, maybe sit down and read a book. It's just a lovely, tree-lined street.
Yes, exactly. When I look at the street, I want to go riding my bike up and down the street. It doesn't matter what time of day. It's lovely, right? So I also noticed that there's a bunch of trees, which we didn't have in that first picture. So maybe they're what's causing this effect in our brain, right? So this is called the heat island effect. And Emi's going to talk a little bit more about that with you all.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Emi. Thanks for the introduction earlier, Maria. So even though, we just talked about how those pictures made us feel, and it might have an impact just by looking at the picture, but it is a physical phenomenon, and it's called the urban heat island effect. Urban refers to a city, so like Los Angeles is an urban area, and an urban heat island is an urban area that is significantly warmer than surrounding rural areas due to human activities like human infrastructure, like buildings, roads, as well as all of our industrial activities that we have in cities, all of the, cars, vehicles, factories, all of these things, what define an urban area, actually make that area a lot warmer. And what does that look like? Can you click on the next slide? Yeah, so this is a visualization of the urban heat island. It's almost like a bubble of hotter air compared to the surrounding countryside. And this is a huge issue in Los Angeles because we, as we'll talk about more in detail later on, with climate change getting worse every year and temperatures going up, this is increasingly impacting the health of our communities, and specifically some communities more than others. And so you'll learn about what solutions Tree People have and what we can all do to tackle the urban heat island effect. So if you go to the next slide, here it's just a demonstration of what the urban heat island effect looks like in a very local scale, in a very small scale. So you can see it just right on the street too. So say that today's high temperature is 103 degrees. If there is a tree that is providing shade, like right here, you can see in this picture, the temperature besides that tree is 75 degrees. Whereas right next to it in the sun, it's 125 degrees where the lady is sitting, maybe waiting for her bus. And then on the concrete on the floor where it's directly, being absorbed by the sun is 140 degrees. So just on this one image, this one setting, you can see there's a huge difference in temperature. And this has a very, very big impact on our health. So if we go to the next slide, urban heat island effect and who does it affect the most? So the burden and impacts of extreme heat disproportionately affects low income urban populations and people of color. And in fact, the three groups that I expect to see the largest increases in mortality are the elderly, African Americans, and Latinos in a study that Tree People was a part of. And you might think, oh, like how many people actually die from urban heat? But actually, urban heat is the leading cause of weather-related deaths in the US, and this applies to Los Angeles as well. And this is because when it's really, really hot outside, it can exacerbate all of underlying health conditions. So if you have diabetes, if you struggle from obesity, if you struggle from cardiovascular conditions like heart disease, if it's really, really hot one day, those diseases might actually contribute to premature death, as well as the elderly and these other populations that are specifically vulnerable, and we'll explain why. And that is because these communities live in neighborhoods that have less trees, less urban tree cover. So you can go back to the other slide. Thanks. Yeah, so they live in communities that have less tree cover, as well as lower quality buildings that have, less air conditioning units, that have not as good insulation, which keeps buildings cool. And all of these things contribute to the urban heat island effect. And it can also create a feedback loop of heating effects. And this can, really exacerbate our health conditions. And in fact, African Americans have been demonstrated in studies to be 52% more likely than the average to live in areas where a high risk for heat-related health problems exist, while Latinos are 21% more likely to live in these conditions. So as you can see, it is quite a public health equity issue, and it just ties back to what Maria is going to be talking about later on. So if you go to the next slide, we can see this from a bird's eyes, bird eye view. So the picture on the left is South Los Angeles, and then the picture on the right is Studio City. Maybe we can just take 5 seconds or so to just look at this image. And what do you notice? Maria, what do you notice in this picture? Like, what is the main difference?
I noticed that the picture on the left, which is South LA, has a lot more houses in less space and also less trees.
Yeah, so there's just significantly less trees. And this is going to be exactly what Maria is going to be talking about in terms of the history of why this is. And again, this impacts our health and our life. So this is the next slide. We'll be talking about how we can solve these issues. So 25% reduction in heat related deaths are possible, saving dozens of lives during the worst heat waves. And how would that be possible? Well, we're going to be talking about it. And the answer is trees and shade infrastructure. So it's not just all doom and gloom where we're saying, you know, people are dying from increased heat. There are solutions, and that's why we're here today to talk about the technologies and solutions that we have to combat these issues. All right, so I'll pass it on to Maria, who's going to be talking about the history of how come we have trees in certain communities and not in others.
So thank you, Emmy, for passing over the mic. Before I go into explaining redlining, which is maybe a term you've heard before, I do want to say it's a teeny tiny bit of a bummer. But the reason that we're sharing this information with you is not to make you really sad, but actually to make us more powerful, right? If we know what's going on in our cities, we are that much more likely to help change it. And that's what we're trying to do. So this is a map of what our city was organized as when redlining was created. And as I've mentioned, you've probably heard the term redlining. So back in the 50s, people were trying to buy homes. And obviously they wanted the nice rich people to have nicer homes. So they divided Los Angeles, and not just Los Angeles, actually the whole entire United States, into different districts, right? Given 4 different colors. And here we have our legend at the bottom left-hand corner that shows us what these colors mean. The green is first grade. So these were areas that were very desirable. They had the best community, well, not just community engagement, but the best land, the best resources, and we wanted to give those to the people who could pay more for them, right? So we wanted to make sure that that land was set aside specifically for them. And the legend shows us that as we go from A grade to D grade, the traits of the land decrease in desirability. So what we have with B is that second grade, it's still desirable, but not the best. C, the yellow, that's not so desirable. We're starting to see some, bad things in those regions. And then D, it was considered a dangerous area. So we didn't want to separate that land and sell it to the people who had the most money. So this is how that was rearranged. And as you can see here, I go into depth about what we just went over in the legend. So A was desirable, B still desirable, C decreasing, and D dangerous. And the way they decided what color to assign to every area was by looking at the population, whether there were a lot of people living in that area, what kinds of jobs the people that lived there had, right? Were, like, for example, this shows us that a specific area had a lot of laborers, employees of soldiers' home, semi-skilled workers. It also tells us what percentage of the people living there or of the families living there were foreign families, and what nationalities they were: Mexican, Japanese, Italian, Slavic. And then their income, how much money they were making. And so they essentially decided what color to assign to every area of the map depending on the people that live there. And now let's look at how that's continued to affect us. Land gets passed on from generation to generation. If my parents bought a home and they completely paid it off, it's theirs forever. So when they pass on, they're going to leave that land for me, and I'm going to continue to live in the area that they lived in, right? So it's going to continue to affect generations and generations. And this is what redlining looks like in Southeast LA in 1950. We see a lot of yellow, we see a lot of red, very little areas of green and blue. And this is what redlining looked like in Beverly Hills, which we all know is, 90210. So yeah, we see there's a lot of green, a lot of blue, very little red, and very little yellow. And now let's take a look at how technology helps us see the effects of the past on the people living there today. But first, are there any questions?
Yeah, feel free to pose your questions in the question sheet, and we'll try and answer. I'm not seeing any coming in right now.
Well, we'll give it about a minute or two. Well, why don't I ask you a question in the meantime, Emmy?
Go ahead.
Does Tree People keep the heat island effect in mind when we go out and we do our job?
Yes, of course. It's completely central to what we do. We don't just plant trees anywhere. We don't just, plant trees where we see soil. We are very strategic with where we plant trees. We've actually been planting trees in Los Angeles for almost 50 years. So we're a very, very old organization. And, we were started by a 15-year-old teenager who saw that trees were dying in his local mountains, and he wanted to help. And it grew into this community-based organization. And, with climate change and with all of these issues coming to the surface, we have these social justice issues in mind when we target certain communities to plant trees where are trees needed the most. And we work in conjunction with universities in LA. We work with governments to try and really take into account the sustainability of the future of Los Angeles in terms of climate change, in terms of urban forestry. So what we're doing is really important, and we are actually, one of the leading organizations in the world when it comes to urban forestry. So yeah, answer is yes, Maria. And I'm not seeing actually any questions. I'm not sure if I'm on the right document actually, but you know what, let's just keep going. Unless, Carolina, do you see any questions that are being posed by students?
I don't have the document, but
Okay.
let me pull it up as you continue. So
Okay.
students and teachers, please encourage students to ask any curious questions they might have throughout our presentation. We'll be asking questions once again.
Yeah, and as Emmy mentioned, Tree People does keep all of this in mind, but we need research to back that up, right? We can't just say, we have this map from almost 70 years ago. Let's use that to base where we're going to be planting our trees in, right? So no, we actually created our own tool recently called the Tree Viewer, which you can find on the Tree People website. It looks like this, and there's a link down there, which we'll share with you all if you'd like it. Carolina, I can email that to you so you can distribute it, and you can play around with this. And this tool helps us figure out where we have most trees, right? So I actually put together a tiny little quick video to give you a tutorial on how to use this tool and how we use it at Tree People. So I'm going to play that now. Let me know if you can hear the sound or not.
Okay, so since we're talking about how technology can help us combat climate change, and we just covered urban heat, let's take a look at a tool that's going to help us and that oftentimes really helps us here at Tree People to determine what areas need the most trees and where we should go plant. This is our Tree People tree viewer. You can find it at treepeople.org/tree viewer, and it looks like this. First, I'm going to go over the tools that we have, all the little buttons here that are going to help us navigate this program. So we have the zoom in button, below that zoom out, and we have the default extent or the home button. That home button is going to take us back to this initial view. So if I were to zoom in really, really far into the map and then don't really want to have to zoom out to see this view again, I could just click the home button and it'll take me right back here. Then we also have the legend, which we should go over together. It tells us how much tree canopy there is currently in that area. So the dark green means that the tree canopy is equal to or less than 68.0%. And the lightest shade of green is going to tell us that that area has a tree canopy of less than or equal to 4%. So that's very low. We're not really going to use this button with the layer button because the map does that for itself when we zoom in. So we're just going to stick to that. And then we have the share button. So if I were to find some really cool information here and I want to share this with somebody, I could just use that. It'll give me a link that I can then post on my social media or email to a friend, right? We also have a search bar here where we could type in a very specific address if we don't really want to go through the hassle of navigating the map today. That's what we're going to be doing because I want to look at a bunch of different areas, but we're also going to be using that search bar. And then lastly, to the right over here, we have the average existing tree canopy coverage. And this tells us what the average is for the area we see currently in the window. So this is the majority of LA County, not really all of it. I think I'm missing a little bit at the top. But roughly the average tree canopy in all of LA County is 19.98%. That's pretty good. That's about a fifth of our county. So let's now take a look at how some very specific cities compare to LA County as a whole. First, since we talked about redlining and what Beverly Hills looks like, why don't we go there? So I'm going to use the search bar to type in Beverly Hills, and that's going to give me an option. I'm going to go there. And now we can see Beverly Hills, right? The 90210 area, this very dark shade of green. That means that that's one of the areas that has the most tree canopy, right? Yeah, and even if we kind of look out here on the outskirts of this area here, we still see a lot of darker shades of green, right? Even the lightest shades are still somewhat green. They don't look very, very white. So that's going to show us that we actually have a lot of trees. And we look at the average existing tree canopy coverage, which is 24.56. That's higher than the average canopy for all of LA County. So they're doing pretty well in Beverly Hills, tree canopy wise. Let's take a look at another one of the areas we discussed, which was Southeast Los Angeles. So let's take a look at that. Southeast Los Angeles has a tree canopy of 11.61%. So that's about half the average of LA County as a whole, which means we don't have a lot of trees here, right? The darkest shade we have here, let's look at the legend, would probably be about less than or equal to 17.6%. So not that great, right? And those are the highest areas. The lowest areas are this very, very light shade, which I believe falls under less than or equal to 7.6%. So not so great. And if we click on a very specific square, so let's say that's the average, I see most of those like in between shades, the potential tree canopy for this area is 46.67%. So that's what we could have, right? But it's not what we have. In this area, we have 12.35. So we at Tree People use this tool to figure out what the average existing or potential tree canopy could be, and then what it actually is. And then it becomes our job to plant enough trees that those level out, right? So that our existing percentage raises and lands at what our possible percent could be. So that's how we use it, right? But that's not the only way that you can use it. You can use it to find out how your area is doing. I'm broadcasting this from Van Nuys, California, so let's take a look at that. Give it a second to load. But I can already see that the average existing tree canopy coverage for Van Nuys is 22.77, which is pretty good. It's higher than the LA County average, not as good as Beverly Hills, right? And this looks very different from the Beverly Hills area where we didn't have any of these white areas, right? Everything was some shade of green. For Van Nuys, that's not the case. We have, it's more developed, I guess, there are more houses, it's more densely packed than Beverly Hills, which is why we have those little spaces that are missing information or that don't have any trees in them, right? Now let's take a look at where you all are. East Los Angeles, let's go there. Okay, the percentage for East LA is 12.49%. So a little bit better than Southeast LA, but definitely not as good as the county average or the Beverly Hills or Van Nuys average, right? So this is one of the areas where we have to focus. And as soon as I'm done with this little tutorial, we're gonna cover some of the ways that Tree People is getting involved in these areas and how you can get involved as well. But let's take a look at what East LA's potential tree canopy could be. The potential tree canopy here is 44.16%. And by the way, I'm able to access this information by clicking on one of the areas, right? So if you know that your zip code is 91755, you could click on that area and that'll tell you more closely what the possible tree canopy and existing tree canopy are for your areas. And that's how we use this tool and how we encourage you all to use this tool, right? Look at the way that redlining has impacted us. And we don't tell you all of that information to bum you out. We tell you that because if we know about it, we are able to change the way that we are being affected, right? By taking action and getting involved. And that's exactly what our next step is going to be. So Emmy, right back to you.
But not
Awesome.
but not before we ask some questions.
Well, we're running short on time, so I'm wondering if we should just finish the presentation and then do questions after. What do you think, Carolina?
We have a couple of questions. How about we take two? Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a question from our Nimitz Middle School, Jesus Clemente Magaña. He's asking, why in the rural areas are there no trees? And is there a way we can plant more trees in those areas to make it look cooler?
Emmy, do you want to take that one or should I?
Yes, I can take it. Yes, there are definitely ways to plant trees, and I think I don't know if he means suburban areas surrounding around Los Angeles, but as Maria said, the tree viewer that Tree People developed, you can see the potential, so you can actually see where trees could be planted, but aren't currently any right now. So that's where Tree People come in. Our long-term goal is to plant trees all across LA where there's not enough trees. And also that's where you come in, because we depend on volunteers and we depend on community members to get involved. And it's not so easy planting trees. We need everybody to agree. We want everybody to be involved. So that's why we're here today talking to you about planting trees in your community.
And that takes us to our second curious question from Daniela from Belvedere Middle School. She's asking, so can we start planting trees in these areas that are lacking trees?
Yeah, we can start doing that. We actually are at Tree People. We have what we call our 5 bright spots. And these are areas that we've already assessed and we've looked at, and we've decided these areas need the most help. So that's where we're going to go. And we focus most of our energy on these 5 bright spots to try to equalize their tree canopy to match what we see in the rest of the county. And one of those bright spots is actually the area that, if I'm not mistaken, all of your schools are located in, Southeast LA and East LA by the 5 freeway. So we're in your area all of the time helping plant trees and do all of that. And that's actually what we're going to cover in the next portion of the presentation.
Great. So yeah, you guys already answered this question, how can we cool our cities, which is by planting trees. And this has been demonstrated by a study. We want to not only plant trees, but we want to increase shade infrastructures, which means buildings and city infrastructures that just provide more shade and are just less open with concrete surfaces, which is very common in LA in these areas. So how does urban cooling actually reduce temperatures? Trees and shade, they provide, they reduce the solar heat that's gained in the environment because it reflects the solar energy that is entering into Earth. And also trees and shade, they convert solar radiation into evapotranspiration, which is evaporation and plant transpiration. If there's more trees, there is more transpiration. If there's more evapotranspiration, that just means there's more water vapor in our atmosphere, which helps cool down temperatures. And trees and shade also improve energy efficiency and decrease the need for air conditioning, because if there's more shade and it's cooler, there's less need for air conditioning. And a lot of homes don't have air conditioning units. So that would be really beneficial for people that actually are vulnerable to these heat conditions. And finally, dark surfaces like tarmac and concrete, like in the picture you saw at the very beginning, absorb sunlight, while lighter surfaces reflect the sun, because dark colors like black absorbs more light energy. So by having trees, it almost acts like a reflective surface where more of the sun is being reflected back into space and not being absorbed to heat up our cities. And so what are the benefits of urban cooling and planting trees and increasing shade infrastructure? There's a lot, and these are just the highlights. So health, in terms of literally saving people's lives. And the studies show that these cooling technologies can reduce heat-related deaths by 50%, especially in these vulnerable communities that Maria and I keep mentioning. And not only that, trees and shade can improve air quality because we have less dependence on things like air conditioning and other energy-intensive infrastructures that actually pollute our air through our use, as well as trees actually absorbing carbon dioxide, which is harmful. Excessive carbon dioxide is harmful and what contributes to climate change. So that also leads to water quality. More trees means more water is being absorbed into our groundwater, which is very good for our watershed, which is the health of our overall ecosystem. And it also reduces the polluted runoff when it rains. All of that water is running off into the ocean, picking up all of our trash, picking up all of these chemical pollutants and just sending it straight into the ocean. And this is made worse by all the hard surfaces like concrete and roads that basically act as a slide for these pollutants and trash when it rains. And this harms marine organisms like turtles, sea turtles, jellyfish, fish, and just our ocean ecosystem. And also it reduces their energy use, as I said, which can benefit the economy by cutting down costs as well as saving lives, reducing the burden on our medical infrastructures. And they try to look at the economical benefits of urban cooling in over 150 cities across the US. And it found that there was a financial incentive in terms of billions of dollars long term. So there's so many benefits to urban cooling, which is providing more trees and increasing shade. So how can you get involved? How can you help us increase trees? Well, with lockdown, we can no longer host big volunteering events, but we actually just launched our first volunteer program in the summer, which is tree care. We have a lot of young trees that we plant across Los Angeles that need tree care, which involve proper watering and weeding around the roots. And so if you are interested, please reach out to us, and we have a lot of resources and guidance for you to carry out tree care, which is a fun project that you can do with your friends and family while actually being, socially distant and directly helping trees in your communities. And it's also really fun. And one other thing we wanted to mention was that we have really exciting news. We have our first ever youth summit happening in a month on August 12th and 13th. August 12th is International Day of Youth. So to celebrate this day, we are hosting a youth summit where we're going to be talking about environmental justice, environmental issues in Los Angeles, how you can take action, resources that we have for you, and just an educational component as well. So if you can be there, that would be awesome. It's open for middle and high school students in Los Angeles. And if you have questions, reach out to us at any time. We love to hear from you directly. You can email Maria or I. And we hope you enjoyed today's session and that it was educational and that you're feeling motivated to do something, to volunteer with us, get involved. Tree People is truly a community-based organization. We depend on you to help drive our work and make a better future for Los Angeles. So here we have our final question. If you have any, we'd love to answer some.
Yes, Maria and Emmy. So Marley from Hamasaki Elementary wants to know if the website is often updated or is it just there as informational?
Yes, it is going to be updated. The Tree Viewer, we actually just inaugurated that maybe 2 weeks ago, if that. So everything that's on there right now is very, very current. But as time goes on and we continue to plant a bunch of trees, I believe we've planted over 3 million trees so far as an organization. So as we continue to plant, the Tree Viewer is going to have to be updated, and we're going to be working on that. It's a great question.
But we have several more questions. So I think what I'm going to do, I will send them over to Emmy and Maria, and we will provide answers to make sure that we do honor everyone's questions and we give you a proper response.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds great.
I want to thank Emmy and Maria from Tree People for being here to provide this amazing awareness and informational field trip here to help our students figure out what are the steps that we can all take. So we see there is a climate issue, but we see that there are solutions to this. So we, on behalf of the Huntington Park, Walnut Park, Vernon, Gage community. We thank you, Emmy and Maria, for being here and taking the time to make us more aware and more knowledgeable. So thank you so much, and we will definitely keep in touch with you.
Thank you, and thank you for having
Thank
us,
you so
everyone.
much. Yes, we had a great time.
Good.
Bye.